back alley, and this is a place everybody, when they look at it, they say, oh, that's the alley in back of Genesee, in between Genesee and Sheridan Road. I says, no, it's not. It's not where you expect. This is Atlantic City. This is behind the casinos. This is what you see back there now. This is directly behind the casinos. And so you had, and all these boarded up old buildings and everything. And the only thing I put in it that wasn't what I saw, I put the dog in only because I needed a scavenger. And that was, I put the dog just to make it look like this was back alley type of thing. It's a pastel. I did a series of barns in McHenry. One of the artist friends of mine, he was a watercolorist, but he wanted to have the artist do a lot of paintings of barns, because the barns in the Midwest are going slowly. There are less and less barns. So this is my version of a barn. I try to make it look a little impressionistic with its coloring. It's a lot of strokes. I try to get as much color into it as I could. And it was a fun piece. This is another pastel, but this one is different. This is abstract, and I usually start these abstracts with a contour drawing and just let it happen. I just look at the color. I don't think of it as a figure. I think of it as just shapes, and the shapes are to me where the interest is. This particular piece I won Best of Show at the Art Center in Highland Park. It's called Redhead. This one is an oil. A friend of mine, artist friend, Ed Paschke, he's a Chicago artist. He was quite well known internationally. He had one-man shows over at the Art Institute. Well, when he died, I was a little bit, I felt like I lost a friend. And yet I didn't know him that well, but I knew his wife because she used to babysit my kids. Used to ride the train with her when she was going to the Art Institute. And so I felt like I wanted to do something. And I started out where I had painted Ed in his style, or sort of in his style. And the abstract part on the end over here, I established it as it was going to be Nancy, his wife. But after I did it, I didn't like it. I thought she looked very uncomfortable. She had Parkinson's, and for some reason I just never. And I went back into this painting, and I abstracted her, and it just sat. I was going to carry it further, but I never did. And Katrina came over to the studio, and when she saw it, she said, oh, I'm going to take that one into the show at Dandelion. And I said, well, it's not finished. She said, oh, no, that's fine. And after I saw it in the show, and I got some comments on it, well, apparently it was fine, because nobody questioned the sloppiness of her portrait. And it was because the hardness of Ed and the difference with her, it blended. It was what it was supposed to be, I guess. This one is called Tut Tut. I wonder why. It's kind of King Tut, right at that. When I painted this, was right at the time the Art Institute was having the Tut exhibit. And I just thought, well, this could be kind of interesting. And this is kind of a loose version of Ed Paschke's technique of bright color, patterns, and I just used it, the design of his sarcophagus that he was buried in, and basically that's it. I think it's colorful, and I think it does kind of say Ed Paschke, so I leave it at that. I had this photograph and it was backlit, and I looked at it, and I was painting some of the Paschke's things at that particular time. I did about 8 pieces, and then I did this one, and I'm looking for another motif, and some of them I use triangles, and some of them bars, and this one I decided to stipple, because I did a different type of background for it. They were blended backgrounds, two colors, just letting it blend into each other. And then I did this stippling, which kind of gave the feeling of the baldness I have, with the thinness of the beard. But then as I was working, I noticed that the reflection in my glasses, I had these shapes, and the one shape reminded me of the Walt Disney movie Mulan, and this was the dragon, and so I kind of just emphasized it as the dragon. And then later on, the one on the other side didn't have any shape like that, but I was inconsistent with the style, and I redid that particular one, and now I think that the two of them work together. It's just a kind of fun piece, and surprisingly, this looks more like me than anything I've done of myself, except for one other. I did the one when I was in the Army and I was a young kid, and that one I still think looks like me. This is a one again in another version of my Paschke style, and this one is cubed up, and it's the images of Will Rogers, and he wore a straw hat. He had that big ear-to-ear grin, which I exaggerated. That's probably why it doesn't hit you as much, but it's with the abstract look about it, makes it harder to see. Anyways, this was part of that series, and I liked it. I liked splitting up the areas. I used tape to divide the spaces up, and then I loosely let the paint do what it wanted to do in its spot, and then when it dried, I took that tape off and put the tape on the other side, and let the next area have its fun, and then I just added to it and subtracted, and that's the way some of these things develop. This one is an older watercolor that I did. It's called The Contest. It was a watermelon contest out in Colorado, and we were just driving by, and we saw all these trailers, and they were pulled over, and there was a lot of people running around, and I think there was a Ferris wheel and whatnot, and then I caught the table with the watermelon contest, and I stood at the end and I took a photograph of it, and I was going through my photographs, and I said, gee, that's interesting. I think I'll try it. And I did this watercolor. Uh, it's not the traditional style. It's kind of again, shapes. I'm very big on shapes, and if I can get interesting shapes, I think I've got an interesting painting. This is not the original drawing. It was a watercolor, and it was a commission. So the commissions go to the artist or the person who's paying for it. And this is a guy I played golf with. These are his family, his kids, and grandkids, and the motorcycle. I was part of it too. And I just wanted to show that I do some portraits in watercolor. They're not usually they're usually always in pastel or oil. And I thought this came out well, and that's why I'm showing you. This is a pencil drawing, and because I was a fashion illustrator, I gravitate to figures and this was, and clothes, because that's what I was illustrating. Well, if you notice that there's no figure in here, and yet you feel a figure. And those little puffs of what is it? It's the scarf or something? There's a pajama, I think. It's a silk pajama. Anyways, I call it frou-frou, because that's what it reminds me of, just something frou-frou. It's a female feel-good thing. And so that's why I did it. And I did a whole series, and this is the only, I think this is the only one I have left of the series. I must have did at least 10 or more of this type of black and white figures without the figure. This one is a portrait of my brother, and he had just passed away maybe a couple of years before, and I never did a drawing of him, and I ran across an old friend of mine, in fact the one that painted this big painting in back of me here, at the North Shore Art League building, and he was doing pastels, and he had this technique where he took just the square part of the pastel and made strokes, and I said, God, that's fascinating. Just what he did. And so I decided I would try to do this technique where you leave such a lot of space between each stroke. And I think it came out pretty good, because it still looks like my brother. And I miss the old guy. This was when I was still working in a studio, when things were slow, I used to sit there and with a mirror in front of me, and I would make sketches of myself. But I would always think about, what do I want to be today? Do I want to be Van Gogh? Do I want to be Picasso? Do I want to be Toulouse-Lautrec? Who? And I just kept, and I would draw in that style, or I would just try to come up with something different. And then some of them were straight, because I've been wearing glasses almost all my life. I took my glasses off and I did one of myself. I couldn't believe how much I looked like my brother. And so as time goes by, the sketchbook just sat, and there was a art contest down in Beverly, on the south side of Chicago, and I did this one where I Xeroxed my sketches, and in some cases I cut them up, other cases I did different things to it. I glued them down, then I painted it, and dripped paint on it, and I did everything silly about it, and then I had left that one area to do what I thought was a more split, and I just staged it across. This one just was mostly in the technique of the brush. And here was one where I disjointed it this way. This one was this way, this one was this way. This was a kind of a similar to a cubist type of style. Everything was flying away and everything. This is more Picasso, which has a profile and a straight on. That's the type. I was smoking at the time. I had a cigarette in my mouth. This one, it looks like I'm wearing a hood when I did this one. But I just split that one up too. Now let's see, where's the... here's the one that looks like my brother, with no glasses on there. This one was a fun one. We did a portrait of ourselves as a class group, and so I said, what am I going to do with these portraits? And nobody's going to want this picture of somebody else. So then I got the idea, well, let's see. When I was in Japan, I remember seeing the monkeys over a doorway, which was see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Well, I says, well, that's only 3. I think there should be 4. And the 4th sin is think no evil. And so that's where the last one over the forehead comes from. The portrait is of me. I can do anything I want with it. Who cares? And I became an old punk. And so I got red hair, and I got earrings, and I got piercings all over the place, and neck chains, and that. So that was that one. That was just for different color combinations that worked with it. There was the gold for the earrings and the glasses and everything. And this one was, I played around with the gluing things down, and I says, well, I look like I've got in a fight, but I lost. I have a wisteria in my yard, and I have a trellis for it. And I did these, and I did it strictly as a line piece. And maybe 2 years later, I came back and I redid it with aqua tint, which gave me the different tonal variations on it. And so the combination was real good. And I liked that. Well, this one was you can work in any media, but the subject here was to take something big or small and put it in something that was opposite of what it should be. Well, I have a Great Dane, kind of Marmaduke-ish, in a salt shaker, and that's where I come up with the salty dog. And this is a linoleum cut. This one was my version of the flood and packing the animals. Well, some of these animals I have are kind of prehistoric rather than just straight modern day animals. I mean, I have mastodons instead of just regular elephants, and I got these large birds, which are what do I call petrodactyls or something, and just they're not proportioned, but it's basically the arc, the rain, the animals just being herded into from the plain. The rain is already coming in.